As Confederate statues fall, Native people and allies here in the Southwest have renewed their call to remove statues honoring Spanish conquistadors and mission priests, both of whom enslaved indigenous people and stole their land. As a prologue to Wade's sermon, here are just 3 of many examples. Don Juan de Oñate was a conquistador who colonized New Mexico for Spain. He brought settlers, took native land, explored local geology, but his expeditions were primarily vain quests for gold. When no treasure was found and settlers wanted to return home to Mexico, Oñate refused and executed the malcontents. In 1598, Indians from Acoma Pueblo resisted when a squad of Oñate's men wanted the food supplies the Acoma had stored up for the winter. 11 Spaniards died in the skirmish. In retaliation, Oñate ordered the pueblo destroyed. Nearly 1,000 Acoma were killed. All survivors older than 12 were enslaved, and men older than 25 had a foot amputated. When Spanish authorities heard about the Acoma massacre and Oñate's despotic treatment of the settlers, he was recalled and banished from New Mexico for excessive cruelty. The statue of Oñate in the previous slide has been removed, as has this one, which is on its way out in the slide, near us in Alcalde. Oñate headquartered there in a pueblo he renamed San Juan. In 2005, the pueblo officially took back its original name, Oke-Owingeh. In 1680, Pope from Oke-Owingeh led the Pueblo revolt against Spanish colonists in Santa Fe. Pope forced the Spanish to retreat to the south, and for the next 16 years, the pueblos of northern New Mexico were independent. But in 1692, the Spanish sent a new governor to Santa Fe, Don Diego de Vargas. He promised clemency to the outgunned Indians if they would accept the Spanish king and the Christian faith. Whitewashed history says de Vargas led a peaceful takeover, but when Puebloans resisted land grabs and enforced Christianity, he responded by murdering and enslaving many of them. So for years, modern Puebloans have protested an annual festival parade honoring de Vargas's entry into Santa Fe. A few years ago, this Entrada parade was dropped. This statue of de Vargas was removed this past June. In 2015, the Roman Catholic Church made Junípero Serra a saint, depicting him as a kind-hearted Hispanic missionary to the indigenous people of California. But this legacy has been called into question by evidence, including evidence from his own writings, indicating that Serra was one of the architects of a mission system that exploited, brutalized, and enslaved Native people, banned their customs and languages, and forced them into Christianity. Recent removal of Confederate symbols re-energized calls for California to take Junípero Serra down from his pedestal, literally. Several statues of Serra have been removed recently, including this one in San Francisco. Of course, taking statues down does not end racism or make up for past sins. Statues are symbols. But symbols tell us what we value, and values tell us how we want to live into our shared future.
Ann and I won't miss the de Vargas statues of Santa Fe. De Vargas to us has mostly meant the de Vargas Mall on the north side of town. There's a Starbucks in the mall that we often stop at during one of our occasional forays into Santa Fe. Some people are considering dropping the de Vargas name from the mall. Will that make a difference to us? It should. That would be a good thing to do. In our 9 years of living here, we've certainly come to appreciate the diversity of cultures in this majority-minority state where Native Americans plus Latinx outnumber the white population. We've also come to a greater understanding of the histories involved and a growing awareness that this commingling of different peoples has often included conflict and oppression. A statue, a ritual, a name can represent not just a glorification of our own ancestry, but a painful poke in the eye or punch in the gut for some descendants who were forced to recall the negative side of those histories. All of us, direct descendants or not, should care about legacies of injustice, current experiences of hurt and continuing oppression. Eliminating statues as visible symbols of history gone wrong must be just a starting point for understanding, acknowledging, and working to redress injustices. History is a tangled mess. Those of us of a certain maturity of age know from firsthand experience we've been here before. Not exactly, but in a spiral that revisits familiar themes. Time to protest yet again, to try once again to fix the broken parts. We must never get to the point where we proclaim mission accomplished. How can we fix history? History is the story of people on the move. And wherever people move, either someone else is already there, or some new folks soon come along who want to be in your neighborhood. Conflict and oppression perhaps inevitably follow. What if we all just went back to square one? Square one, would that solve our problems? Well, scientists tell us that the human species evolved in East Africa. We certainly can't all head back there, 8 billion or so people all crammed into Kenya. It just wouldn't work. Scientists also tell us that after a few million years in Africa, the human species managed to spread across most of the globe and were fairly equal to one another up until about 13,000 years ago. That's the starting line recognized by Jared Diamond, historian, biologist, and anthropologist, in his masterful and foundational book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. From that point on, starting on different continents, human groups proceeded on diverging paths that created the history of the world. Some human societies seem to have had greater success, if we want to call it that, in developing innovations leading to organization and power that was superior, again, to choose an arbitrarily evaluative term, superior in relation to other societies they sooner or later encountered. Diamond's convincingly developed argument is that it was not any racial differences that made the white European imperialists starting in the 1500s of the Common Era able to dominate the darker-skinned peoples around the globe, but the inherent advantage of their starting points. The western end of their continent of Eurasia, with its particular resources and environment. The European starting point contained the fertile soil that led to the guns, germs, and steel that conquered the world. Diamond's correct version of the story of how certain groups of humans came to dominate and oppress others purely by the chance starting point on a superior continent pulls the rug entirely out from under those who chant white power and believe that their elevated power and status is just because of their just deserts for being better and working harder. So how do we still unravel this historical unjust mess? Luckily, humans have been granted the innate reason to recognize the common humanity of others. or we have the innate evil not to. We can push ourselves and our societies to redress injustices built into history. We must go back to the square one of inherent worth and dignity shared by all. We can work for and celebrate movements in history that have that aim, such as democracy, the valuing of diversity, and social efforts to help everyone achieve their full potentials. Dr. Martin Luther King, mirroring sentiments from the 19th century Unitarian Universalist minister Theodore Parker, said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I believe that. But I also believe we have to have a counterweight to our putting faith totally and exclusively into history. Many felt that with the election of Barack Obama, the US had conquered racism. Who thinks that now? Other commentators declared the end of history when the Soviet Union fell, believing that capitalism had clearly won a decisive and everlasting victory over socialism. Who still believes that? Finding complete vindication within history is a fantasy to my way of thinking. It has never happened. It never will. History, with its struggle for justice and compassion for all at the best of times, is always in the making. The words of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes offer a tempting summation. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? There is nothing new under the sun. Or as the character King George III sang in Hamilton, oceans rise, empires fall. Oceans rise, empires fall. Some great dose of humility about our accomplishments in history. Our ability to accomplish anything in history is in order. Not that we shouldn't try and try very hard with great perseverance, but I will strongly suggest that we could have a lighter attachment to the historical developments taking place in our current world. A lesser despair, a more tempered joy for the news of the day. For history is not the only reality in which we dwell. Our lives also take place in eternity. The eternity of the universe, of being itself, is equally a part of our complete identity. This is another square one to which we can keep returning in our minds and hearts in moments of quiet reflection. Each of our stories includes the fact that there was a time before we existed. Out of the womb of eternity arose each of us as individuals. Then we die and are reabsorbed into the endless fount of creation which produced us. Is eternity's value increased or sullied by current events in Washington? On a bad news day, do we curse the world, wish we had never been born, and regret that the universe itself had ever come into being? Or does the holiness of being endure? And by holiness, I mean that we feel a sense of awe when we look deeply at the universe around us and think, wow, what an amazing place. Perhaps we can loosen our grip on history as the only way to live meaningful lives. We can open our grasping fist to allow in the holiness that already and always exists, from the vast space-embracing galaxies to the equally vast space between atoms. And all this holiness resides within each of us. This means that the universe always has our back, not in any guarantee of happiness or escape from pain, but in assuring that we always have worth and dignity. We need to set aside moments to turn ourselves away from the entrancing thrall of history's activity and our fevered choreography within it, to acknowledge and celebrate our eternal and fully accomplished value as holy participants in a holy universe. With those new powers strengthened to discern and focus on the sacredness of eternity, we can return to the work demanded by the world of history, creating a more just and compassionate society for all beings. We can develop a sure but flexible hold on our place in both eternity and history. That would be a good way to erect worthy and lasting memorials to the human enterprise. So may it be.